There's no denying today that nations in Southeast Asia are being sandwiched, and especially we look at this political complication regarding this world trade structure. We know that today when we look at the economy, the modern day economic situation, trading far exceeds than anything else. But what about this political structure? Back in the days, it was rather difficult to distinguish between the politics and the economy. But right now, today, we have to talk about the politics and also along with the conversation in the economy. Take the nation of Vietnam, for example. Traditionally speaking, that we're seeing this political structure within the country. But these days, based on the latest report, that the structure of Vietnam's top leadership is changing. Not only we're seeing the four pillars, but also we're seeing additional change necessary to the bigger picture. And what about the younger generations? They're also witnessing the changes across the spectrum, from social changes to political changes, and even today, try to align with economic agenda. Well, so that's why in this episode, we're going to talk about all of them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, who's the Dr. Hong Nguyen. Dr. Hai is currently a senior lecturer of politics and social change and international relations in the College of Arts and Science at VinUniversity in Vietnam. He's a political scientist and a very experienced lecturer and researcher in politics and international relationships. Well, Dr. Hai, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
My pleasure, Will.
Well, Dr. Hai, again, before we talk about or tap into the conversation of the younger generation, let's talk about what I mentioned regarding the structure of Vietnam's top leadership. I am looking at the article right now. It talks about that traditionally speaking, there are four pillars for Vietnam's top leadership. And they are General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, the State President, and the Prime Minister, and the Chairperson of the National Assembly. But recently, there seemed to be a dramatic change to the structure, adding the fifth pillar to the current structure. And again, why do you think this is happening today in Vietnam? And what is the central, or what is the essentiality of the pillar for Vietnam today?
Well, thank you, Will. It is a very interesting question and very relevant to what has developed in Vietnam recently, more particularly in the run-up to the 14th Party Congress of the Communist Party of Vietnam early next year, 2026. Now, it's true that the Communist Party of Vietnam recently passed a new directions providing the ranking of the officers in the power structures in the Communist Party of Vietnam. And of course, the fifth pillar, as you just mentioned, which is the standing members of the Politburo and Secretariat, is considered as the what we call the key top leaders. So that's why people consider the standing members of the Politburos and the Secretariat as the fifth pillar, adding to the existing four pillar previously. Now, in reality, this is for me, it's just an official recognitions of the importance of the positions only. But in reality, the standing members of the Politburo and Secretariat has been a very important position in the power structures of the Communist Party of Vietnam already. And he or she is always ranked number 5 in the Politburo. And that's why she is very important. And I think that's quite significant and logical, because he or she is the person who is the daily caretaker of the Politburo's and the Secretariat's affairs. And he or she is playing the role as the coordinators of all the work under the leadership and the directions of the Politburo and the Secretariat daily. So that's why, I think for the recent recognition of his position, I think is logical and I think is significant. However, as I said, it has been a very key and very important position in the power structures within the Communist Party of Vietnam for decades. It's not new because that position has been in the power structures for decades already. Of course, people talk about the fifth pillar. It's just a formalistic recognitions only. But of course, it shows the recognition of the party of the position and the importance of the position.
Well, Dr. Hai, according to the report, some call it this has been a unprecedented shakeup in the Communist Party of Vietnam, especially when we look at the stabilization of the political party. But meanwhile, you and I, we had the discussion before. We know for the leadership role in the Communist Party of Vietnam, one of the most profound campaign centers on anti-corruption. And we know this has been not only crucial for Vietnam, but also for many countries across the spectrum. But let's go back to what we discussed at the beginning. Regardless, we're seeing the four pillars. Regarding we're seeing the fifth pillars. How is that strengthen the current anti-corruption campaign? Because we know that Vietnam, it's not the West, given the obvious. But such campaign focus on anti-corruption, focus on political drive, and focus on economic agenda matters to the people in Vietnam and also strengthen the credibility of Vietnam. So from their perspective, what is the correlation between the political structure and to this anti-campaign model or anti-campaign movement? Your thoughts?
Well, I think first of all, we have to notice the political cultures in Vietnam and also the power structures in Vietnam. In Vietnam, as you know, Vietnam has only one party in power. Right? So it's not a multi-party systems. So now I think in terms of the power structures itself, it hasn't changed much since 1976 when Vietnam's unified country and the Communist Party of Vietnam emerged to be the only ruling party in Vietnam. So the power structures of the Communist Party of Vietnam has been unchanged for decades, and I think it will not change for more decades to come. Now, within that kind of political background and culture, we need to understand, more particularly, of course, when we talk about the anti-corruption campaign. So it really depends on not the power structures, whether this is 4 pillars or 5 pillars, or it depends on whether there is a Politburo, or before that, for a short period of time in early 1990s, there was what they call the standing bureau, political bureau. So I think because of the political background, because of the political systems and political cultures, it really depends on who is on the top of the 4 pillars, because that is the party secretary general, because the party secretary general is also the chairperson of the Central Committee or Central Commission for Anti-Corruption and Negative Practices. So it really depends on the, who is on the top position. And also, of course, it depends on the solidarity within the Politburo and the more broadly the Central Committee of the Communist Party, which consists of 180 official members and 20 alternate members. So, and that's why the Communist Party of Vietnam, all the way, and I think it's also relevant to the case of the Communist Party of China too, and also other, one-party political system. Solidarity is also very important, or unity within the party is very important. So it really depends on, first, who is on the top leader, top position. Second, it depends on the unity within the party. And of course, finally, it depends on the legitimacy and the trust of the public in the party. So regardless of, political developments, the restructures within the apparatus or the systems, I think it really depends on the three factors that I just have mentioned.
Well, Dr. Hai, I believe there's no debate that when we talk about unification of the party, and also we talk about the unity of the party, again, not to put elephant in the room, but look at what's happening in the US right now. I mean, the positive side, it's America, it's well known for two parties or even more than two parties. I mean, this is the beauty of the Constitution promises. But on the other hand, we're seeing this government shut down, and we're seeing the federal workers and being laid off and, without paychecks. But we're going to get to that for a second. But let's talk about another significant person. Again, I'm looking at the article right now. The person is called Mr. Tran Kim Tu. In a recent speech, that Mr. Tu strongly urged party officials to, and I quote, set an example in work and in life. We know it's one thing to read the text, but it's something else to put the text in reality. So, Dr. Hai, from your perspective, when we hear the words from such what we called a powerful leader in Vietnam, what does that mean? And how do the words actually signify to the people in Vietnam today? What does that mean when we see put examples in work and set examples in life? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, as I said again, Will, that because in Vietnam, there is only one political party in power. So to be in power, the only party need to be an example, need to set the example, need to earn legitimacy from the public, right? So in order to earn the legitimacy and to enhance and consolidate its legitimacy, it had to set an example in order for the people to look at the party as an example. And first of all, of course, the party itself need to prove that it has to be a legitimate party. It is legitimate representative, only representative for the people in Vietnam. That's the party itself. But on the other hand, of course, from the viewpoint, perception of the public, they also, when they look at the party, they see, well, because you are the only, party in power, so you have the power. So if you abuse the power, then it is something like a failure. That means the one-party system failed. So if when they look at the party and they see that, they realize that the party is doing well, the party member is not, are not abusing the power for their own gain, for their family gain, etc. Then the public and the people don't see the need to have a multi-party system because whether it's a one-party system or multi-party system, but corruption is rampant, and unity within the party is not unity anymore, is a disunity or some kind of disorder or something like that. So it's about a both way. I think that kind of statement from one of the top leader of apparently Mr. Chen Kamtu now is the fifth pillar within the power structures. So the statement is a strong message, but also is a kind of a reminder to the party that it needs to consolidate, it needs to earn legitimacy from the views of the public. So I think for me, that's the only things that we can read from that statement. That's the key message to, of course, implicitly convey and mentioned by Mr. Chen Kap-tu to all party members. Set example, by in life and in deed, in work, etc. is really true in Vietnam, more particularly when we put in the context of the anti-corruption campaign. In the past 5 years, more particularly, in the tenure of the 13th Party Congress, dozens of high-ranking officers, more than 30 member of the Central Committee, including the top pillars, right? The president, the party secretary, the standing committee, standing members of the Politburo and Secretariat would have to step down. It somehow is were disciplined as well. And other member of the Central Committee was disciplined, and even member of the Politburo was put in jail, etc. So in the past 5 years, the party has implemented an anti-corruption campaign or total law burning furnace. In the eye of the public, that is a good thing. But of course, negatively looking, then they will see, well, because you have the power, you are the only one party in powers. So if you don't clean yourself, if you don't set the example, in the eyes of the public, how can you prove that you are legitimate to be the only one party in power in Vietnam? So again, as I said, the message is about legitimacy enhancement, consolidation of the party, more particularly in the new context in a changing world. So it is very important that for the parties they need to, and party members, they need to set example in the eye of the public. The party is now is not the party was in 1980 or 1990 because the country is now open to the outside world. The people have, the opportunity to access to information, around the world. They know what's happening in the world, and of course, they know what happened within the party, and they know how the government, the party are functioning. So, the party is not something like a closed box, right? Even though, of course, they have the meeting because they have, and their own structures, but with the development of technologies, of media now, of social medias now, of technologies now, people knows everything, right? So they, and of course they monitor, they track the life and the work and even the behavior of the party members. So I think overall is about, in short, the legitimacy consolidation of the party.
Dr. Hai, I have two more questions. Let's talk about, again, go along with what you just said. Since people in Vietnam is no longer live in a box, information is accessible around the world. What happened in other countries directly influence the domestic affairs as well. I want to focus on younger generations today in Vietnam. Recently, the news broke out that late September, there was a sudden cancellation within the Ho Chi Minh City's what they called a flagship Pride March related to LGBT events. Dr. Hai, you and I, we seldom discuss the younger generations when it comes to Vietnam, and also we seldom discuss the social changes in this country. But right now, as we're looking at what's happening in Europe, as we're looking at what's happening in the West, younger generations are mimicking or imitating this desire. Suddenly, it's like a volcano looking for the eruption. So from your perspective, how do we understand the existence of the LGBT community in Vietnam? And by seeing the cancellation, is that a political shakeup, or is that a message sent to the world or sent to the people in Vietnam to say, hey, listen, Vietnam is Vietnam, US is US, and France is France? What does that say about the cultural engagement or the cultural shift in the country? Your thoughts?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, Will. And I think to address these questions, I'm afraid that we need to touch on, many other, issue fields, from, as you mentioned, culture, the legal perspective, the political system, etc. And more particularly, of course, the characteristics of Vietnamese people. Now, I just had a lectures on social change 2 days ago, and one of the topic that I talk about, and of course the question that I ask my student to discuss when we look at the what we call the freedoms in the United States, and the perception of Vietnamese people on freedoms, particularly the perception of the young people in Vietnam on freedom. So I think they came up and a very interesting response. But yeah, again. And you rightly also mentioned that the United States is still the United States, Vietnam is still Vietnam, and China or the UK, they have their own cultures. And I think for not only Vietnam, but also for most Asian, more particularly East Asian cultures or Asian society, the countries and the people have their own cultures. And of course, it's very hard to, take the Western values and put it in, East Asian societies and say that this is the values that you need to, apply, or you need to, cherish. So I think, again, back to your questions, first of all, is about cultures. And of course, somehow in the Vietnamese society is rather, progressive in the sense that they even recognize and accept the LGBT communities. But still, as I said, we cannot, assimilate the acceptance with the cultures or attitudes, because I think this is the fact. Of course, we know that human rights, freedom, democracy are all universal values, and it applies to all society. But of course, people already are different entities, right? We cannot say, well, I'm Vietnamese and I must be American, or American must be Vietnamese, etc. So it's all about the national culture. And as I said, of course, on the one hand, we accept it, we tolerate the existence of LGBT community. But on the other hand, again, we talk about the legal perspective and the law. On the other hand, now I didn't know about the cancellations of the LGBT marches in Ho City, as you mentioned, because I was not in Vietnam and overseas, and I didn't follow that. But again, in Vietnam, of course, and I believe in other countries, that when they want to march, or when they want to organize or assemble, etc., they need to follow the laws. It depends on how the law regulate is. Say, for instance, you have to register for it, or you still have to inform the local authorities or whatever. I don't, as I said, I didn't know about the event, but there might be some possibilities. We don't know, right? But yeah, again, as I said, law is another story, and the acceptance by culture and the tolerance of the people is another story. What I can say. But what I'm on one another issue that I just want to emphasize is that the younger generations in Vietnam now, they are very progressive because they have the opportunity. We always compare what we had in the past of my generation, my parent generation, and what my children's generation, one day, the younger generations have now. And of course, we see that there was a big change, and by all means, and that because of the improvement of the life, of the living condition, and the accessibility to a better condition, including technology, the internet, and many other things. So there's no doubt that, of course, the younger generations in Vietnam now, they are very progressive, both in terms of lifestyle, in terms of thinking, and I think that's good. And it's really, reflects the development and the progress, the growth of a nation and a state. And that also the ambition, the goal, the strategy of the Communist Party of Vietnam. When we talk about the two, centenary development goals set out by the Communist Party of Vietnam, the first one is by 2030, Vietnam will become a developing country with high income, and 2045 becomes a developed countries with high incomes. So I think, of course, development, goes hand in hand with the developments of, thinking of, needs and demands, right? So I think that's quite normal, so I can see the thinking and the perception of the younger generations now change a lot, and they are more modernized, more progressive than our generation. Of course, their parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, and of course, however, if their modern perception of the society does not mean that they lose their background, right? They really lose their the root, because they are still Vietnamese, right? And I can't tell them. I can teach them. As a lecturers, I can teach them what is good, what the model of governance is good, what is the best practices, but I can't tell them that they need to behave like this and like that, because it really depends on them, because they are independent entities, and they have their own capability to develop their intelligence and also mentality. So it depends on, and as the question about, as you know, that to 2025 is a very big year in Vietnam, right? Celebrating the 80th anniversary of the national independence. And of course, Vietnam held the military parade. And I asked my students, how does they feel about it? And most of them say they were very proud of Vietnam, right? They were very proud of, of being a Vietnamese. That because they saw the development of the country, the military strength of the country. So that is their own feelings, their own impressions, their own thinking. I can't tell them that, well, they need to think about it like that, or like what I was thinking. So they are independent entities, and they will decide what is the best one, what is the worst one. So I think more particularly my role as a lecturer, that I tell them this is the model. I present to them this is the model. This is what happening. This is what going on, and what they choose is their own decision.
Dr. Hai, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you one of the matters that everyone is paying attention. By the end of October, the APEC Summit is going to be held in South Korea. We know this is one of the most fundamental and also significant economic joint meeting around the world. Not only that we're seeing and hoping that the leaders from both US and China are able to attend in person, but also we know the countries in Southeast Asia are also going to show up as well. So the last question I want to ask from Dr. Hai is, how significant is for Vietnam to participate the APEC Summit this year? And what are some of the expectations, especially we talk about this economic agenda or this economic projection for the country? Your final thoughts.
Well, I think APEC is one of very important international mechanism and forums that Vietnam really cherished and value, because APEC, like other international mechanisms, are considered as a multilateral forums that in line with the multilateralism approach and strategy, emphasized and upheld by Vietnam. So I think Vietnam, of course, consider APEC, like many other international mechanisms, are very important and multilateral forums that Vietnam need to take part in, participate in actively, proactively. And that's also the forum, the venue where Vietnam can, and of course more countries like Vietnam can, raise their voice and contribute their, influence in more particularly a, uncertain and turbulent world today. So of course Vietnam will take part and will, of course, contribute to the APEC Summit. And of course, still the tariff war between the United States and other countries still going on, more particularly between China and the United States. And we recently heard that, in response to China limitation of exporting rare earths and also rare materials, the Trump administration intend to impose, 100% on Chinese commodities and exports. So I think when the tariff war is still going on between the United States and the rest of the world, and of course most APEC members, then of course Vietnam, consider APEC as an opportunity, as a venue again. And of course, most APEC countries, expect and consider and take it as an opportunity to re-emphasize that, protectionism is not really good, is not, something that works today in the modern world. And of course, they will emphasize again economic collaboration and economic cooperation as well as the multilateralism in the world's structures and architectures is that. So I'm sure that everyone expect, and even everyone expect the meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump in Korea. But we don't know, with Trump, unpredictable president, he may change to the last minute. And remember, in his first administration, 2016 and 2021, that Trump did not really put much attention on APEC. And of course, that's because aligns with what, policy American first. So there's no doubt. And of course, even Trump, during his first administration, he didn't attend any ASEAN summit. So we don't know. We need to wait until the very last minute. But of course, again, all APEC members states, I think, consider this a really good opportunity to re-emphasize economic multilateralism.
Well, again, Dr. Hai, we don't know what will happen to the world economy and also the global trade system. But based on the conversation that we had today, one thing, if I can conclude, is the word authenticity. All countries need to be authentic in order to understand the global structure. And
Correct.
All politicians need to be authentic in order to have better messages for the voters. Well, again,
Correct.
ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor to speak to Dr. Hai Hong Nguyen. Again, Dr. Hai is currently a senior lecturer of politics, social change, and international relations. He is a political scientist and a very experienced researcher in politics and international relationships. Well, Dr. Hai, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. We'd love to have you back on the show as we continue and pay attention to the global affairs. So thank you so much for doing this.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Will.
Very